This question deals with a 45-year-old female with proteinuria and peripheral edema undergoes renal biopsy. Light microscopy findings are shown on the slide below. Which of the following most likely preceded this patient's renal lesion? So first of all, this patient is 45, female, has proteinuria, peripheral edema, and the biopsy. And what does the biopsy show us? Biopsy shows, look at this round blob right here. This is a Kimmel-Wilstein nodule. I'm just going to call it a KW nodule because sometimes I feel like I'm not pronouncing it right. So the KW nodules are found strictly in diabetic nephropathy, which is a nephrotic syndrome. In diabetic nephropathy, we find Kimmel-Wilstein nodules. Now, what is this nodules made up of? These nodules are usually made up of acellular material. Okay? And these acellular material are produced by the mesangial cells, or I should say mesangial cells degradation of extracellular mesangial matrix makes this acellular material. So mesangial cells degrades acellular matrix, okay, which becomes this acellular material, this acellular material of the KW nodule. These nodules are usually round in structure. They are going to be laminated. They are going to be eosinophilic. And you're going to be able to see them on H&E stain and PAS stain. You'll be able to see them in both of them. They're usually localized in the periphery. So that's about KW nodules. Now, diabetic nephropathy is one of the most common cause of end-stage renal disease. In fact, 30 to 40% of chronic renal failure happens due to diabetic nephropathy in US. Okay, now there's something else I want to talk about. The hyperglycemia and diabetes mellitus is thought to induce ANP and other biologically active substances. So hyperglycemia is going to induce ANP and other active substances. But this ANP is responsible for something very unique. This ANP is going to vasodilate. As a result, it's going to increase hydrostatic pressure in the glomerular capillaries. And as a result, it's going to increase filtration rate. It's going to increase glomerular hypertrophy. Okay? All these changes are going to happen due to this ANP and other biologically active substances. Now, due to all this increase, there is going to be increase in glomerular basement membrane. Look at this basement membrane. It's like a tire. Okay? Now, at the beginning, diabetic nephropathy is usually asymptomatic at the very beginning. Okay? Perhaps they may manifest microalbuminuria, but usually they're asymptomatic with a little bit of albumin in the urine, which is maybe not noticeable. Later, we're going to see nodular and diffuse glomerulosclerosis. And that diffuse glomerulosclerosis eventually is going to lead to these KW nodules. Now, these morphologic changes is due to proteinuria, hypertension, nephrotic syndrome, and renal failure, which will eventually happen due to this glomerulosclerosis that is brought on by the ANP and the diffuse increase in glomerular basement membrane. Okay, so that was an overview on diabetes. Now, looking through the option, I'm just going to run at the very end. So this patient is going to have a long history of diabetes mellitus, because if it wasn't long history of diabetes mellitus, this patient would have microalbuminuria. But we can clearly see a very thickened basement membrane, and we can see a very big KW nodule, which tells us very clearly that this is diabetes mellitus.